Good morning. This is the new variation on what used to be called the Trustee Open Forum. Given the fact that Michael is new and new to the institution, and given the fact that he didn't know any better, he has agreed to actually participate with me. So this is now called the Leadership Forum, and we're happy to have that. We are supposed to get during our hour together. It is 5 after, so let's plan on running, say, to maybe 11:15. But Michael and I both have something shortly thereafter. We should have arriving during our meeting those coveted face sheets that have the pictures of all of the trustees on them, together with names and committee assignments, and has at the bottom the trustee email address. They are, we understand, en route. That having been said, in case someone has to leave, let me ask if all of the trustees who are present would stand so that I can just tick them off for everybody one after the other. We've got Bob Jeffrey. We've got Bill Netches, we've got Jim Brady, we've got John Milos, we've got Ron Kilpatrick, we've got Christine Bruschi, we've got Carolyn Bynum in the blue with her arm in a sling, which is not a good sign. Bonnie Gwynn, Jamie Klingensmith, Hugh Butler. We've got our 50th trustee for life, George Snyder, who's over in the corner. Did I miss anybody who's one of our trustees who's standing? All right, thank these folks for the work they're doing, if you will. So I have a brief report in terms of the Leadership Forum. Last year, I received a goodly number of questions at the two trustee open forums that we hold, and again at the what were billed as chairman's office hours that we held. And there were three questions that came up more frequently than any other questions that we had, and I could not answer them. Let me answer them now. Yes, it is highly likely that the CSO will be playing this season. Yes, it is highly likely that the amphitheater will be constructed on time and within budget. And yes, the presidential search is going just fine. So with that, let's open it up for questions. Yes, indeed. Let's open it up for questions. You know the drill. Alternating from side to side, please use the mic, and you may do one of three things. You can direct the question to Michael, you can direct the question to me, or you can lob it up and watch us either try to both grab it or walk away from it and hope it hits the floor. Yes, ma'am, over here.
Carol Rislow, 5 Thompson. So I have a question, actually. A letter turned up in the Daily yesterday, kind of following up on our shared space initiative discussion that just happened, that there was a complaint from someone in an operations golf cart about a sign that was, welcome to our neighbors. What I'd really like is a clarification on, is there actually some operations rule that says yard signs aren't okay? If that's the case, the shared space initiative just got shot in the foot. So that's sort of the question.
So there is, in the rules and regulations of the Chautauqua Institution, a prohibition on signs in the front yard of homes during the season. And I think in the past there has been the enforcement has taken the form of common sense. And occasionally, as my predecessor George Snyder would often say, it's tough for us here in Chautauqua to legislate common sense. So we're going to try to do better on that issue, but yes, there is such a rule and regulation in the Chautauqua rules.
So I guess I'd like to have that rule be a bit revisited. For the last person who parked their car here, their car is still missing and so are they, or there's bike parking or no bike parking or parking, there are umpteen signs. But signs of welcome that are clearly signs of welcome, especially with this year's theme and in this particular political climate, I think that rule, I would just like to request that rule be revisited.
It probably will be looked at, but it's probably not going to be looked at before the end of the season. So we're going to be stuck with common sense and enforcement.
Thank you.
Morning. I'm John Dilley, a long-term Chautauqua resident. I've been coming here since I was 3 years old, which is about 70 years. So I've enjoyed the institution and the lake for a long time. And I'm also on the CPOA board, Area 5 rep. And President Hill, you were at our last meeting, and we talked about doing something about the Bemus Bay people who basically put a chemical attack into the lake. They put a herbicide in at 20 times the amount that's proposed, and also against the local studies that said that this particular herbicide is not to be used in the lake, and herbicides haven't been used in the lake for about 50 years. So they went all the way up to the governor and somehow got permission to do this, and they said it was a test. Well, it wasn't, like I said, it was more of a chemical attack than a test, because a test you would do single herbicides at a time, not two at a time, and not put massive amounts in. Actually, doing more than one is against the basic regulations. So we talked at our meeting about, I entertained the motion to take a stand against doing this. We can't undo what was done, but I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. Right. So my question to you is, you had agreed in the meeting to do something. Yeah. So my question is, and we're in the process of getting a lot more data. Tom Cherry, is Tom here? He was here earlier, but, okay. Tom put together some talking points, and Jane Conroe also put together a letter that she sent to the New York State DEC. So I'm not asking for doing something immediately, but I want to know what the plan is for doing something sooner rather than later.
Sure, thank you for that. And I'm not sure if they're here yet, but our county executive is supposed to be coming this morning, as are Dave McCoy, who's our Watershed Coordinator for the county, and Bill Boria from Environmental Health. I talked to Vince yesterday, our county executive, and expressed our concerns also that we wanted to be at the table. Vince encouraged me to get more information on this. Some of the things I shared, his perspective on that was that they weren't the entire story by a long shot. And I'm not here to dispute whether that's true or not. What I've said to Vince is Chautauqua Institution is one of 2 institutions that takes its water from the lake. We're extremely concerned about it. We want a seat at the table, and we want to understand what has happened and what's going to happen. And if they come, they're certainly able and willing to answer questions, which I've encouraged them to do. What I would say to community members, and it's the reason I asked them to join us this morning, is I don't think we're well served by going aggressively toward this without understanding what's truly happening.
Right.
So the 2 things that we've committed to the community, which you should have in the next week, is the permit that was sent to the DEC, which is actually, it's not the county at all that permits this, it's the DEC. They're sending us that permit, which we're going to make available to the entire community, as well as the updated plan for the lake and the zones on that, which I'm also going to share with the community. I think what's helpful is for us to be armed with as much information as possible, right, to understand what really is or isn't happening, and then to respond. But what I can report on behalf of the institution is we're all over this. I talked to Vince for an hour yesterday, over 2 conversations, and he's assured me that we'll be at the table for any of these discussions going forward. What he had shared with me yesterday was that there is not currently another scheduled test coming up from this. He has a different perspective on how safe it was or wasn't. And again, I'm not here to argue who was right or wrong. I'm here to gather the information so that we can aggressively and proactively make sure that the way that we interact with the water is both safe for drinking as well as for recreation and the long-term health of the lake. So when they show up, I'm happy to direct questions to the folks that are on the ground on that, but just know we're all over this, and that as we have information, we'll do, which we've done my entire tenure here. If we've got it, we're sharing it with you in as much real time as we possibly can. And we'll be back to you consistently as we know more about this and what the plans are. But we share your concern and we're all over it.
Great, thank you very much.
Tony.
Thanks. Tony Goldfarb, 57 Palestine. I'd like to raise just a couple of issues that are very relevant to handicapped people like me. But remember, we're all just temporarily able-bodied. You never know what could happen. I'm sure many of you noticed that there are more electrified vehicles on the grounds than ever before. And you have to say, why do we need so many of these? I'm somebody who tries to avoid that and use the bus and tram system. It's very challenging. To give you an example, last week I waited for the normal tram, not the Lake tram, which we now have, for over 35 minutes. That makes people like me say, gee, I should try to drive my car with my handicap sticker. That raises parking issues, especially over at the amphitheater, where new signage has eliminated the no overnight parking permits that are there. And for instance, over at Hall of Philosophy, there is a sign that leaves special hours at which no parking is allowed. I wish there could be more emphasis on that so that people who, as a last resort, actually find a parking space, which typically I have not been able to do. Second, in terms of the vehicles on the road, the people who are now using electrified carts and other vehicles, first, many of them don't have any experience with them, and it's quite dangerous. Second, there's more traffic on the roads than ever before. I don't know if there's room in many of our streets for a bike and electrified vehicle area. I don't think there is, but I think this is something that is combined with transportation issues. The bus drivers here are wonderful. There aren't enough buses. There aren't enough in good condition. The drivers are very challenged. And in terms of the new tram system, which now has a lake tram for those people who need it, wonderful, but we still need the other trams as well. So many issues on the grounds related to the increasing number of older people, handicapped people, who are creating challenges that we haven't had here before. So I appreciate all that's being done. The Property Owners Committee reported on this too. Thank you.
Thank you. So some of you may know that I spent about 4 years at United Cerebral Palsy, so accessibility issues and access issues are really important to me. They're kind of in the core of who I am, both for personal narrative reasons and past work. Chautauqua is an interesting community in that it gets built over time. And a lot of when it was built before accessibility laws and regulations were in place, which makes for an interesting challenge when you then try to retrofit out, in essence, a small town for that, which is not an excuse not to do it at all. Part of that is being examined as we build or reconstruct buildings, but it's also going to show up in a master planning process as we look at the entire grounds and how do we make them more accessible. Your key point on transportation is really absolutely on. I'm glad that the Lake Tram is seen as a plus. We know we've got to figure out different ways to get people around the grounds, especially as a core part of our population is aging and perhaps not as mobile as they once were. Some of that is increased trams, but some of that is having us help you understand where those trams are so you don't have to wait. And so Emily and her team are working on things so that you can look on your phones to see where is the tram, when is it going to show up, so that you're not standing, waiting, and wondering. Absolutely agree with you on the need for increased transportation and also thinking through how people get around the grounds and what do we do once they get to facilities. So it's very much top of mind. There's some specific plans that are coming out, but totally hear you.
Thank you.
I once thought that the world would be okay if it wasn't for the people. I come to Chautauqua, and as much as I enjoy everyone here, I see people walking out onto the street as though it's a sidewalk. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but there are handicapped vehicles, there are bikes, there are cars, there are trucks that some of us can't hear, but people step out on the street like it's a sidewalk. And it's something that all of us need to reconsider, that all of a sudden we become brain dead as to what a street is when we get here. It's such a wonderful place.
Sherry Stanley, 51 Foster. I would also suggest that there be rules about age on trams. I see these kids that are quite capable of getting on the trams, where there are people who are not so capable having issues. And I think those are the people that they should be pointed towards. And I also see the institution trams, and this was said earlier, our institution vehicles going well over 12 miles per hour. And when I've seen one, I've suggested they slow down and they do it quickly, but I'm not there to do that. And I've got grandchildren, as we all do, out there. I want the streets to be safe.
Yeah, issues of navigating the grounds are tricky ones, and I was listening a little bit to the Property Owners Association. If you're a bicyclist, you think that's the best path, but the pedestrians don't love you so much. If you're on a bike, the folks that are driving around electrified cars are a nuisance. I think what we've got to figure out as a community is how do we safely cohabitate, recognizing that folks get around the grounds in a number of different ways. I would hope that, I know my mom raised me that if I were on a public piece of transportation and someone needed a seat, I got up. I would hope that parents would do that for their kids. I don't know that I think it's feasible or that we should restrict who can or can't get on transportation services provided by the institution. But I do hope that younger people would be respectful if someone needs a seat to give it up. I think that's basic decency, and I hope they'll do that. But we've got to figure, this transportation issue is not, there's not one solution to it. We've got to figure this thing out, and it's one of the next big hurdles as we look at how Chautauqua can welcome people of all different ages and mobility issues. So everyone that's raised an issue on that, please know that we understand that. And the piece of this that we control, and I know Sebi's here somewhere, we'll talk to our folks about carts and the like and remind them of speed limits and things. And the rest we're going to have to figure out on transportation, but I appreciate your concern a great deal. And we do have, at some point, we do have our friends from the county and the water services here, so I want to call them over, not to cut off your question. We'll go through your question. No, please answer your question, but I promised you that, and I don't, and I've asked them to come on their Saturday, so I want to make sure. So we'll go through these couple questions, and then we'll pivot to our friends from the county.
Hi, my name's Teresa, 22 Ramble. Want to welcome you. You've done a great job so far. I'm very impressed. And I would have thought you have been here your whole life. I mean, like, so it's amazing. But there was quite a robust discussion about the internet and technology on the grounds. So I wanted to know from leadership perspective, is there any help you can give the property owners to get that? And I also noticed apps. I saw that they're starting to do apps. Every time I go to a conference, I have an app where I can schedule. Yeah. That would be great. So I just want to know internet and apps.
Yeah, thank you for that. So internet access is crucial if Chautauqua is going to go into this next phase of its life. One of the things I mentioned in the master planning work earlier, as we look at everything from transportation to other issues, and I understand others raised fiber optic earlier, remember that's about digging up our grounds and throwing things places, right? That's something that we're looking at as aggressively as we can, given that you're all here for a season and that there are cost and logistic issues. But no one at the institution, from its trustees to its administration, doesn't understand that if we can't find a way to increase Wi-Fi access, this doesn't work anymore. So please know that no one's taking that lightly, that we're moving as fast as we can in the planning and implementation, giving logistics and costs. But you've heard me say multiple times that the institution, while it's wonderful what we do in 9 weeks in programming, part of that vision is also how do we get the institution and its program and its people off the grounds. None of that works without really effective Wi-Fi. So it's central to everything I've been talking to you about is the implementation of that. Please know that we're moving on that as quickly as time, resources, and planning allow it, and we hear you completely.
Sally Craig, 23 WA. I noticed right outside the main gate of the amphitheater, there's big signage about what's coming next season for the plaza in front of the amp.
Yeah.
Would you talk about that?
Yeah, so thanks to a generous gift from the Oddlands, the front part of the AMP is actually going to be a really pedestrian-friendly and beautiful plaza. It'll be bricked more, there'll be benches there. We're looking at how to replace, whether you call it the kiosk or the screen room or whatever we call the little yellow hut. And I've heard 4 or 5 names for it, so whatever you call it, there'll be a replacement for that that will allow us to think about everything from better ways to sell what we sell there, but also looking at the possibility of food service there. But that plaza will extend out. It's going to make it a lot easier to access the AMP from that side of the grounds. Also will create a lot more convening areas for those that like to sit on benches with dogs. There'll be access for that and other gathering spaces. And I think it's just going to really finish off and beautify what is a gorgeous new inner plaza, if you will, at the amphitheater. It'll just extend that out. There are parking spaces along there that get at some of the issues of accessibility, and we can certainly share the plans for that. It's a beautiful, beautiful new gathering space, and we're grateful to the Oddlands for making that possible as part of the project.
Will the fence, the current fence that's there, be moved out or not?
No, that'll still be there as far as, gate and crowd control, but it'll just be an additional outside gathering space, which right now we did enough to make it look nice and to make it accessible to folks, but it's going to be a really gorgeous new convening space that I think will unite that part of the grounds, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you next season. At this point, I'd love to invite up Vince Horrigan and have him introduce his colleagues, because I know there's concern about what we chatted about earlier with the water, and again, I want to thank Vince, who spent probably more time than he planned on with me yesterday on the phone, and he's gracious enough to bring himself as well as his colleagues here. We're lucky to have a county executive that within 24 hours notice will show up. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, President Hill. It's always a pleasure to be here. My name is Vince Horrigan. I'm the county executive, and I wanted to bring you all up to date on what we're doing with the lake and a recent data test project that's been conducted in Bemus Bay. This Chautauqua Lake belongs to New York State, and it is controlled, everything that goes on it is controlled by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. A permit has been granted by the applicant. The applicant was the town of Ellery and the village of Bemus Point for a data collection project. This is really a research project. It is not a general application, but a data collection project for the use of 2 herbicides within 200 feet of the shoreline in the Bemus Bay area. Nothing at all in the upper lake here whatsoever. But it has been done as a data collection project, carefully controlled by the DEC, monitored by our health department. And I want to bring up my colleagues here. First, Dave McCoy, who's our Watershed Coordinator, tell you a little bit about the regulatory rules that are in place for this project. So first from Dave, and then you'll hear from our water quality specialist from the health department, Bill Boria. Dave?
Thank you, Vince. Good morning, everyone. I think it's important that we all understand where we fit in, and as Vince noted, Chautauqua Lake is owned by New York State, and it's regulated by the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Army Corps of Engineers. The work that was done, the data collection work in Bemus, was done as research, which is a little unusual for your typical Article 15 permit. It allowed them to go in and collect some data on an herbicide application that was a little bit different for Chautauqua Lake. But these applications do occur across the nation, and they are legal in New York State. We, as Chautauqua County, are not involved directly in the regulatory process. And we can't even hold a permit to do these sorts of things. That happens to be held by the riparian owners or the towns, which in this case, that was Bemus, the village of Bemus and the town of Ellery. Everything appeared to have gone well, although it happened a little quicker than what we'd have liked. I can say that with reasonable confidence that the DEC did a very good job in evaluating what was being done, and it was done in a very safe and effective manner.
Good morning, everybody. It was a late night for me. I went to see Sheryl Crow. I don't know if anyone else did, but what a great show she did. My name is Bill Boria. I'm a water resource specialist with the Chautauqua County Health Department. And I put together a few talking points. First, let me give you a little background about myself. I'm a hydrologist. I have a background education in geophysics and geology. I'm a licensed professional geologist in New York State. And I've been working with the health department for 25 years. And that includes the first 7 or 8 years of which I spent working on a comprehensive study of Chautauqua Lake. From 1993 to about 2000, 2001, we did a water quality biological study of Chautauqua Lake in partnership with SUNY Fredonia and Jamestown Community College and many other community partners, including Chautauqua Institution, and Tom Cherry was also involved in that. So that's a little of my background. So I know something about the lake. When we heard about this permit being issued, the health department requested that samples be collected at the water intakes for the public water supplies on the lake, which includes Chautauqua Utility District and Chautauqua Water District Number 2, which is Chautauqua Lake Estates. And then the day of the application, I was on site during the spraying, along with 4 DEC staff. One of those staff was actually the scientist that issued the permit, and they rode along with the applicator to make sure everything was going okay. During that time, I was also present when water samples were collected, and I actually went out on the boat to collect these water samples and showed the sample collectors where to collect them from. So I'm sure that they were collected at the appropriate spot. Now, these water samples were collected and analyzed for the 2 herbicides that were used on the lake. And they were, way down in Bemus Bay, about 6 miles south of here, is where the application took place. Of course, probably all of you know that the water flows from the north to the south through the Chautauqua River. So it's very unlikely that water flow would be from Bemus Bay up here, but we wanted to make sure that, that we were conservative in protecting public health and making sure that that we had some data as well. So this was something that the test results, or the testing, was paid for by the applicant. So there were, so I was out there during the sampling. Samples were collected on the morning of the application to get baseline samples before the herbicides were applied, and then again which was June 26th. And then again on 4th of July, and to see what was going on with the the herbicides in the lake, mostly for the Bemus Bay area. But they also came up here and collected samples at the 2 water treatment plant intakes. Now, there were some quarantines or restrictions for water use, and those restrictions included there's a 24-hour restriction after herbicide application for bathing, swimming, or for animal consumption. Animal consumption, you might think of, keep your pets out of the water. Now, these water restrictions were for just a specific area of the lake, and that area was extended from just north of the Long Point, around where the swimming area is, to about a half a mile south of the bridge. Now, that's where the restrictions were required to be put into place. And it included both sides of the lake, that whole chunk of lake right in the middle. So we've got the 24-hour for bathing, swimming, animal consumption, 24 hours for eating fish in and around the lake, the application area. But since we can't control where fish go, we required that, that signs be posted pretty much everywhere where fishermen would be entering the lake, or at bait shops and convenience stores. Let's see, and then there are two other restrictions for drinking water, not being treated, untreated drinking water, which we do have some private intakes in the lake. Some people use the lake for drinking water, and for irrigating crops. Okay, those two restrictions are based on water quality data or sample results. So the test results have to show they're below a certain level. So the restrictions were put into place for 24 hours. They were lifted. That was on the 26th. They were fortunate. It was a cold day. No one would want to be in the lake anyway. It was very cold and windy. And they were lifted, formally lifted through a press release on the 28th. And then the drinking water and the irrigation restrictions were lifted on the 13th of July. And that was based on not only the water quality results, but also a period of time. It was 21-day period the DEC required for those restrictions to be in place. I want to emphasize that there were no restrictions placed on swimming outside of that designated spray area, and also that the designated spray area included a pretty significant buffer up lake and down lake of where the herbicides were applied, approximately a half a mile in each direction. I'm not a toxicologist and I'm not an expert on herbicides. So, our job is to seek out and consult with those experts. What I did was I contacted the New York State Department of Health toxicologists in Albany, and I confirmed what the water use restrictions were, that they were appropriate and accurate. I also reached out to the State Health Department director of the Bathing Beach Program. The Health Department permits the bathing beaches here in Chautauqua Institution and all the other permitted bathing beaches that are permitted, like children's camps and whatnot, around the lake. And they indicated that there should be no swimming restrictions at any of the permitted bathing beaches on the lake. So I was satisfied that the applicant and their consultant was doing things properly. I guess that's really all I have. I do want to mention that, the sample results, the most important thing. I don't have all the sample results, but I do have the results for samples that were collected at the Chautauqua Utility District water intake. And those results were non-detected for one of the contaminants, which was 2,4-D. And then for the other contaminant was the other herbicide was Aquathol K, which is a generic term for endothol, which is the ingredient that's found in Roundup. The results from that sample were 0.17 parts per billion. The maximum allowable level of endothol in drinking water is 50 parts per billion. So it was detected just above the laboratory detection limit. So where might have that come from? Well, as I said, it's the active ingredient in Roundup. So it likely came from, people applying it on the land and it ran off. But we'll know more as we get more of the sample results and we're able to analyze those. And the other thing, and that being said, the other thing I want to mention is that you folks have an excellent water treatment plant here and very good licensed water treatment plant operators that do a good job at removing all contaminants from the water. We have tested your drinking water for toxins that are emitted by harmful algal blooms, for example. We went through a pretty comprehensive program where we were testing daily for certain things, and then every 2 weeks for actual samples that we submitted to Albany to State Health Department lab. And we found that we did find harmful algal bloom toxins in the raw, untreated drinking water, but your treatment plant was able to remove 100% of that, which is a great thing because it's a good treatment plant with pretty much state-of-the-art technology. I guess that's all I have. Sorry, I went too long. Here comes
So
the hook.
what we thank you. I just want you to know that, as county executive, nothing's more important than public health. We have a lot of folks very, very focused on this wonderful lake, as you can understand, tremendous economic, recreational. The environmental protection of this lake is at the top of everyone's list. We want to be completely transparent and tell you what this was all about so that you get the clear information. We are available for any other questions you may have or any other information you have. But President Hill, thank you for the chance to be here. Thank you.
And folks, we're 15 or so minutes away, so what I'm going to recommend is we're going to continue to share information on the lake and the issues around this application. I thank these folks for spending part of their Saturday, again, on no notice, virtually. We don't have additional information other than what was shared with you. We will share the permit itself, which they're going to get us, and we'll continuously keep you informed, but I'm grateful to our colleagues here for taking the time and giving you a lot of information.
Thank you.
So I'd like to take him up on his offer to take questions, but we'll do that offline.
Yeah, and what Vince has just offered that we are more than happy as we get more information to do an entirely separate meeting on this issue. Because we understand that there's probably a lot of details on that. And so as we get the permit and share that with you, again, the county executives agreed to do an entirely separate meeting just on the lake issue.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you, Vince.
Okay, we're back off of the lake onto other issues to the extent anyone has more questions.
Dick Heizenreiter, 22 Palestine. I'm on the Duke faculty, and I'm, of course, concerned about the body and the health that we have, but I also am concerned about the mind. And I spend part of my time volunteering at the archives, and I've been very concerned that there is no digital archives in Chautauqua. And when I mentioned this to Sheriff Babcock, she said, and I said I was going to come and speak to you and some of the new people, the marketing director. She said, you'll be preaching to the choir. So I would like you to say something about, we have wonderful background material on CLSC. But I think CLSC in the future, if Chautauqua is going to be a center for educating the public around the United States and around the world, it's going to have to be digital. They're going to have access to what goes on in Chautauqua, which has not been our attitude. I've been here for 50-some years, and it has not been our attitude. You have to come here. But what is in your mind, what is in the plans for making what is available at Chautauqua also available to the wider public? I was glad to hear you say something about that in your comment, but if you could expand on that slightly.
Well, Shara wasn't wrong that you're preaching to the choir at all. I often feel like I perhaps talk about that too much. There's, I would say, 3 different things about what you just shared. Certainly in our archives, and I think all archives, any institution or any body that's not looking at how to digitize those is foolish. Not only to share them, but what happens if there's a catastrophic event at the warehouse of archives, right? I think about that, and we have a wonderful archive center that I'm grateful for, but if something were to happen to that, the lost history would be tremendous. And so we started to think through how do we look at the digitization process of that, if for no other reason than to make sure it's secure and safe for future generations. Then you go into an element of what happens here in 9 weeks and how do we share that. And Emily is here somewhere. She's been bouncing around. She's in the back. Emily Morris, if you haven't, Emily, if you could just stand up and wave. Emily's our new Vice President of Marketing and Communications and our Chief Brand Officer. And one of the things that Emily has been hired to do is to help us think through digital engagement. And I'm going to use one of the titles I don't think we're even using anymore. At one point we were talking about the digital grounds, right? We talk about what happens on the grounds, so what's a digital grounds, and how do we think about, whether it's the programming from last week or any of these types of conversations, how do we share those both in real time and in an archival sense so that people can participate in those conversations? Matt Ewald talks to me a lot about, people will say, gosh, that was a great lecture, or that was a great program. But at the end of every one of our theme weeks, we've actually created a body of academic work that speaks to specific titles. So our questioning of a crisis of faith in the last week, that collection of thoughts and ideas, including your thoughts and ideas, is actually contributing a new body of work to the notion of this. How do we share that? And how do we help those that may not have been lucky enough to participate here on the grounds with us? How do we share that in real time? You're seeing it in some minor ways, whether that's allowing people on Twitter to ask questions, but that's just skimming the surface of what we can do. We've been live streaming our Sunday worship services for the first time. So if you're not here, you can actually go on the website and participate real time with us. There's lots of issues for us to sort through in regard to sharing program. Some of it ties to who we bring, right? Not every speaker will allow you to do that. Not every artist will allow you to do that. Folks that are lawyers have a whole bunch of logistics and issues we need to sift through, but it's something we're very concerned about. Yeah, the billable hour is a powerful thing. But the last piece of it is, what do we do outside of those 9 weeks, and how does Chautauqua remain a part of the national and international conversation of issues of importance? And that is, that's a proposition we're going to start testing in the next year. How do we show up in different communities? How do we show up digitally so that if we've started a conversation in these 9 weeks, you don't have to wait for the next summer's 9 weeks to continue it. This whole notion of digital engagement is critical for Chautauqua's future. One, because it allows us to do so much more than just what we're doing. But the other piece is, I don't know how many times I've heard a Chautauquan say to me, I can't physically get there anymore. And Chautauqua's lost to me because of that. I take that as a moral charge. You should never be kept from the ethos of what this place is because of physical or economic barriers. Economic barriers we could go into for another 3 hours. But there is a way for us to amplify the work that happens here, not only during the 9 weeks, but beyond. And it all ties to this notion of digital. And I will tell you that as the Board of Trustees were doing the search process, one of the things that they acknowledged was that Chautauqua needed to take one giant step into this next age. I don't know that any of us have the exact blueprint for that yet, but from the highest level of our governance structures, there's been an acknowledgement that needs to happen. Keep raising it. Really important.
just add, you've been coming to Chautauqua longer than I have, so you have the same memory that I came to when I first showed up and wanted to go to the archives and was directed to the file cabinets in the basement of the Smith Library. Thanks to Hale and Judy Oliver, we have a wonderful archives building. Michael's right. I mean, those of us who are on the search committee stressed with all the candidates that we needed to enter the digital age and that we needed to get there faster. And it's not just the outreach. It's not just how to put our programming into the ether. It's about looking at 144 plus years of history and getting that preserved in a way that makes sense. We'll get there, and hopefully we're going to get there faster than it took us to get from the file cabinets at Smith to the Oliver archives. But it's a pace and priority issue, but it is a priority.
Joe Goldfarb, 57 Palestine. Actually, Tony and I do continue a lot of Chautauqua through the year, and we do it by following the careers of students who have been here and young artists who have been here. And I wondered whether there's any way that the institution can tap into letting people know when people who've been in training here or who've been in the Young Artist Program are performing in their area. I mean, we hit a jackpot last November when there was a performance of Don Giovanni at the Met. 4 of the 8 principals were Chautauqua alums. Pete and Anna Gerber, who are coming back to dance in return, were both touring the country with Aspen Santa Fe. They were in Philadelphia, they were in New York, they were in Houston. If there were a way of promoting this, I think it would do 2 things. One is to keep people in touch with at least the arts component of Chautauqua, and second, hopefully increase the willingness to give scholarship money to support students who are here. And I think that's one way of continuing Chautauqua outside the 9-week season.
Thanks for that wonderful comment, and you're right. I mean, Chautauqua was blessed by having brought some of today's most incredible artists have come through here. And we haven't done the best job always of celebrating that, but also helping you understand where those artists go after they leave here. We talked a little bit about apps. Of course, our friends at the Opera, especially with Stephen, I keep saying, wait, let me catch up. But Stephen's been looking and working with Deborah initially on an opera app that we're now trying to expand, which is to help you understand where artists are. Emily has been promoting with us this notion of all those artists are actually part of an alumni association now. I mean, we talk about CLC alums, and we have a lot of work to do to help elevate what those folks are doing, but our artists are alums too. I consider myself a Daily alum. There's groups that have gone on to be incredible journalists that started here. So you're absolutely right in how do we keep those folks top of mind, and I think that's going to happen in some ways with the work that our marketing friends are doing with our arts friends around apps and other ways to do that, social media and ways to do that. For those that don't use social media or apps, we still have to figure that piece out, and I acknowledge that. The second half of your conversation is how do we use that to promote scholarships? Because one of the things that keeps me up at night, and I joke, even though it wasn't a joke, that when I was here as a Daily staffer, I was grateful to be paid by the institution, and I gave 75% of it back just to live here. Now it's the case that because we're growing and growing our programming for young people, we don't even have room for enough of these folks to live on the grounds. We've got some folks off the grounds. So this notion of how we support emerging artists and emerging professionals, I'm grateful for anyone that's given a scholarship. I can't tell you what that allows us to do. The arts companies and Jordan and the Daily and other places where we're trying to bring young people will tell you that those are absolutely critical for us to be able to populate the grounds with emerging professionals. And you're absolutely right to point out that perhaps more would give if they knew what happened when you came to Chautauqua. It's an incredible incubator, and if we can link those two, I think our ability to raise more scholarship funds is significant. So thank you for raising both.
My name is John Burton, 13 Simpson. I would just like to make a comment and say thank you to the board for standing tall against the naysayers and presenting us with this spectacular new amp this year.
I'm Ryan with The Daily. Just to address your question, Mr. Nick, I didn't get your last name. But one of the great ways to share what's happening here at Chautauqua is to share on Facebook. All of the articles, in addition to being printed in the paper, are uploaded online to our website. And an example of that is a story about Two Ames, the new restaurant, has been shared numerous times and has been read, I think, over 3,000 times. If not more. I'd have to check with the web team on that, but because when people share on Facebook, then that really broadens the audience. So literally someone in Switzerland could be reading a story about what's happening here at Chautauqua. So be sure to, if you're not following the Daily page on Facebook, all the articles there, and also can engage further discussion outside of the events, because there's a comment section on the website as well as on the Facebook page. So we really do encourage you all to interact, share what's going on with the community. There was someone who wrote in and was like, is 2 Ames going to be open after the season concludes here at Chautauqua? So that's just a great way to continue the conversation and share the dialogue and the things that are happening here at the institution. And we appreciate you all so much for reading.
There's no suggestion whatsoever that Emily planted her in the audience. Other questions? Going once, going twice. Thanks, everybody.